We're going to get started here in a moment. If folks could please take their seats.
All right. All right, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting ready to start the next session. Please take your seats.
Good morning, everyone. Pleased to go ahead and get started as folks are sitting now. We have our panel here. My name is Mark Arnone. I'm with Amazon Web Services. Contrary to popular belief, we do more than deliver prime packages. We're also in the cloud business, and we are a very proud partner of the Department of Energy, EM, and the National Nuclear Security Administration. So our panel today, I was just reminded, we have a PhD, an engineer, a laborer, and some other experienced folks. So what could possibly go wrong, I don't know. But we hope to get some really good questions and discussion in on the topic of AI. Before we go ahead and get started, if we could just maybe start with Tom, quickly introduce yourselves and we'll go down the line here. And just if you have any opening thoughts on AI, that would be really helpful.
Yes, I'm Tom Burns. I am the Chief Engineer for Savannah River Mission Completion at the Savannah River site. I'm looking forward today to share some of the applications and potential applications that we're looking at improving the cleanup mission at Savannah River site and maybe beyond. I was a little disappointed we didn't have a actual video because I had put my presentation together under my digital avatar, and I was looking forward to doing that. So I guess anybody that's interested in that gimmick will have to see it on my phone. But that's both a powerful but also a bit scary technology. So in any event, looking forward to being here, Mark, and that's.
Thanks, Tom. Dr. Majidi?
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Vahid Majidi. I'm the director of Savannah River National Laboratory, the only national laboratory sponsored by EM. So hopefully we can really focus on some of the critical challenges that EM has. In this particular topic, we're going to talk about AI and the implications of how can it really impact EM's mission. Our focus on a long run is trying to reduce life cycle, consequently reduce cost, but also focus on worker safety as well. And I'm hoping to be able to illustrate that some of the examples of the work we've done, that in fact it has done all of those three things. Not always at the same time, because cost, schedule, better, cheaper, faster. You can choose any of those 2 or 3 parameters, and the rest you have to leave behind. But with AI, you can hopefully optimize them.
Thank you. Ken?
I'm Ken Rueter. I'm the Chief Executive and President of United Cleanup Oak Ridge in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We have responsibility for the environmental cleanup and the federal land reuse program there. I'm also the designated general laborer. That's where life started for me, so you should get a unique perspective from me on AI. The things I plan to talk about is one, to understand AI a bit better so that when I play Madden 25 against my 13-year-old grandson, that I have a chance of winning the game. So that's the gaming theory things that I'm trying to learn. But all kidding aside, we're very focused on working in an industry that's extremely data rich, and we're trying to figure out how to apply machine learning, data analytics, AI, in a practical way to make that data work for us to expand our culture of excellence, which would be, again, I appreciate the earlier comments just made about most importantly, improving worker safety, and then secondly, increasing productivity. So starting to make this data, which we have essentially unmeasurable amounts of it, work for us.
Great, thank you. And Angela?
I'm Angela Watmore. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for EM of Acquisition and Project Management. I am going to bring a different kind of perspective to this as a lawyer and a policy wonk. For somebody that's built their career as a change agent, This is a really exciting time. I'm going to talk a little bit about procurement, and when I talk about procurement and get there, there's kind of two facets of it: the buying of the AI and then applying the AI to procurement, and that's a whole different thing.
Terrific. Thank you for the quick intros. Just to kind of get us started, I thought we would maybe ask Dr. Majidi if you could just kick us off. I feel like, sometime last year, AI burst onto the scene. Of course, you know that AI has been around for quite some time. The national labs have a very rich history in applying and using emerging technologies. But I feel like there's a lot that we're still learning about how we can apply it to our mission in EM. Just would love to get your thoughts to kind of set the stage on AI for EM.
Well, it's always dangerous to give me the microphone first, because I'm going to set a goal line that is perhaps hyperbolic a little bit. But let me start by saying that our longest running AI project at Savannah River National Laboratory is a little bit more than 7 years old. So while everybody has heard about AI, and if you're in a stock market, NVIDIA stock has just gone through the roof over the past 2 years, AI as a concept is simply an evolution of automation, then machine learning, and now AI. Of course, automation goes back centuries, and it doesn't require microprocessor. You could use mechanical means. But with the advent of microprocessor, obviously, we've been able to automate things much more efficiently. And then, as a consequence of that, over the past 2 decades and 3 decades, we've been using machine learning. So automation performs a series of tasks, perhaps complex tasks, in a well-defined pattern, but it doesn't necessarily have any intelligence. It does have feedback that it tells you there's something that's gone wrong, but it can't do anything beyond that. And then if you look at machine learning, we can actually train automation with a series of input data that can make relatively reasonable decisions based on a training set, but it really can go beyond its training set. So, for example, we've done this over the past at least more than a decade on H-Canyon. We've developed spectroscopic technique that online looks at the process and makes critical decisions based on chemical composition of what it sees, and it can go forward with the process one way or another. But it does have some smarts in making rudimentary decisions. Now, with AI, with the advent of new processors, we can take massive amount of data and allow a system to look at a large data set and make inferences based on that data set and a rudimentary decision or perhaps an advanced decision based on how it is vetted by users. So the thing we have to be careful today is that the AI can make many decisions, but just like a child, you have to look at those decisions and tell it what is a good decision, what's a bad decision, and it learns from those processes and it can make better decisions in the future. So while we see ChatGPT can produce various things at a very high quality, when it comes to looking at EM data, that hasn't been explored too extensively. So we have to be working with operators hand in hand, trying to determine what is the best set of decisions that's applicable to this particular pathway. And then as the machines get smarter and makes better decisions, we can use it as an augmented set of decisions to improve our own decision-making process. So I hope I didn't go too much in detail or didn't throw too much jargon at you, but AI is a current evolution of what we've been doing for the past many decades. And now we just have tools that allow us to do things that we've always imagined, but we haven't been able to.
And I think that's a really good overview of how we're using and how we might be thinking about it. Angela, I actually wanted to kind of turn to you from a policymaker's perspective. You mentioned acquisition. You mentioned that there's kind of two separate sides to how you think about AI. Can you talk a little bit more about, project management, how you're using it, and then also how you're buying it or acquiring it?
Let me first start with the FAR and innovation and what we're doing. I mean, I have lived my life with, and it's hard for me to quote the FAR. I don't usually do that, but this one I will, because it is how I've sort of navigated through business. If you go to the front end of the FAR and guiding principles, We are supposed to innovate. We're supposed to be doing that. If it doesn't say, or so there's not a prescriptive law or regulation, then I think it is upon us as leaders to create an environment for that type of innovation. And so the progress with AI and where it's at right now and being able to potentially surpass human thinking in certain aspects is an area that I think we all should be taking a hard look at, and how to integrate in, whether it's a Gen AI, Chat GPT, or whatever, on a daily basis. And I truly believe the foundation of the FAR and the innovation won't change, but I think new policies, a new infrastructure, new governance, I think we're going to see just a ocean of that. Right now, there's GSA has a community of practice, so I highly recommend folks if you can join that. I think there's about 12,000 federal members right now looking across the board. I think everybody, this is a sort of a group think, everybody's jumping on this bandwagon right now. So I think we can leverage that kind of collaboration for the next sort of policy governance for this.
I think that's a really interesting thread. You mentioned the FAR and innovation, which I have not read the FAR as extensively as you, but I sometimes think about, our acquisition being behind where we are in innovation in terms of taking advantage of emerging tech. Ken, I was just wondering, given your experience where you sit now, your past experience within the enterprise, is kind of digital transformation and innovation, is it more of a journey, or do you see it as more of a destination and we're going to hit it and then we're done? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know it. It definitely is a journey, and one of the things I joke a bit about with our team is part of this journey is understanding practicably and affordably how we would implement this tech and what our targets of opportunity are. So that goes to some of the other comments that were made. And the analogy I use for them is, when I'm reading this, when I'm sitting there reading the Alice in Wonderland story to my grandkids, which when they were younger, they're all older now, which is, we need to know how far we want to go down the rabbit hole, how much we can afford to go down the rabbit hole, how far we're going to go. But whatever we do, the journey is we can't run into the Mad Hatter, because that's a bad experience. And so it definitely is a journey, and it's understanding the constraints and the practicality of what we're going to do. And so for us, one of the things we've done is what's the most we're trying to get out of this? And the biggest thing we're trying to get out of it is to make our data, some of the earlier comments, more powerful for us in decision-making space. Still be the decision makers, but to broaden the suite of options that we have, whether it's in worker safety, whether it's in productivity, whether it's in statistical and logistics planning. We all remember the old UPS commercial with the whiteboard. How do we get to the point where we're looking at 1,000 whiteboards with regard to that? And we believe it all starts with the data, because we're such a data-rich industry, whether it's compliance, whether it's regulatory, whether it's business, whether it's productivity, whether it's operational. We can figure out a way to bring all that together at the center, and that's what we're doing at the center of our program, to ultimately then apply tools that are centric around that data and do it in the most efficient way possible. I mean, I know we'll get to this in a minute, but that's why we think this being centered around the cloud is so important. Because the cost of attempting to do it on premises is absolutely preclusive, and I'm sure everybody knows that. And so if we can start investing those resources that are typically devoted to on-premises computing actions to that environment that's centric around the data, natural integrability, now all of a sudden we see data analytics materializing, we see machine learning materializing, we see AI tool sets materializing because you have natural connectivity. So we're looking at it not as a single tool or an approach. We're actually looking at it on how do we establish data analytics / data-centric thinking as a service line within the company. Kind of like what you hear from, y'all's commercials with the NFL, for example. and things like that. And so we're really focused in at it from that perspective.
This is better than the NFL commercial. I mean, you've just made the perfect case for hybrid nature of the cloud and speed and security. So thank you for doing that. I wanted to just kind of shift to get maybe an engineer's perspective a little bit. How do you, in the enterprise that you're working in, how do you think about digital transformation? And the reason why I want to ask this is because I think we all have different views on what transformation is. And we hear this term a lot, but I would just love to hear from you on what it means for your work.
Sure. In our endeavor, where we're very, it's a closure task order-based contract with a very clear scope and mission. Everything we're looking at is under the principle of what's the return on investment. We're not a national lab, we're not a educational institution, so these are very powerful tools, very powerful potential, but it's being looked at from the standpoint of what's the return on investment, what's the practical applications that are going to help us close the Savannah Riverside tank farms 15 years or less, or by 2037. So in doing so, one of the things that I think Ken touched on that was very important is in terms of taking that to another step of being powerful, is being able to bring your data to the tools as opposed to bringing the tools to your data. Things that are on, well, right now we're in the phase of bringing the tools to our data, which means it's on our servers, everything's contained, and from a cyber standpoint, you've got a little bit better posture to contain. But there's limitations. We don't have the budget to set up server farms, data centers, things like that to really get the full power of the tools as they exist in the cloud. So moving forward with some of the initiatives like FedRAMP and so forth to get certification, cyber certification for these cloud-based platforms will be very important to having us expand what we can and can't do. I think we'll get to in a bit on some of the specific examples, but areas that we're looking at on an application basis are flow sheet data evaluation. As many of you all that follow Savannah Riverside, now the cleanup's limited by filtration out of the SWPF filters. And so why that is a really complicated problem with waste chemistry and various things, and it's quite a knot to untangle. And so we're applying a lot of the data analytics software now to try and take a hard look at finding those correlations first, and then using that to allow some of the humans to make causal potential insights. With on-site services, getting to where you're going to have AI find causality is probably a bridge too far. But with opening that up where you can bring your data to the tools on a cloud-type platform, probably something that might be in the realm of possible.
And I think that's a good point. You mentioned, and this is something we have found, is that a lot of federal agencies like the ability to go to the cloud because you pay for what you use. You're not having to invest billions of dollars in infrastructure. And when you're done with that server or that AI tool or capability, you turn that server off, right? And you can use those resources elsewhere. So that, I think, is a really good example. Dr. Majidi, you're the director of a national laboratory. Certainly you have tons of different AI use cases at the national lab. How do you look at digital transformation from the laboratory perspective?
So collectively, we're looking at everything as a tool, right? We are not in the business of writing AI codes. We're not in a business of developing large language models, except in a small area. But what are the tools available, and how do we use them best to address key issues that are of relevance to all of our sponsors, including EM? So if I can just give you a bit of a thumbnail sketch of some of the AI applications that we have. Our longest running AI project is called Ultimus. That's the advanced long-term monitoring system that we have put in place. So notionally, if you're interested in underground plumes, how they move and the contaminations, where do they end up? You end up digging wells around the area of interest. And then you have to send somebody to sample those wells. You collect data. And based on the data that you receive from the sample, from the wells, sometimes later you decide how I'm going to mitigate this. Well, we have an area in Savannah Riverside, it's called the F area, which does have multitude of wells around F area, as well as a significant number of sensors that we've implemented on top. The sensors are relatively dumb sensors. They give you information on humidity, temperature, soil conductivity. So nothing that has to do directly with the nature of contaminants underground. But synthesizing that set of sensor data in a two-dimensional array, you can infer where the contaminants underground are moving. And because the sensors are providing you with continuous data, you can have mitigation in place very quickly, rather than periodically sampling the well. So in a way, we've proven that that technology worked, and now we're ready to implement that in other EM sites. So I believe Moab is the next to receive this Ultimus project sensors, which allow them to determine the flow of underground plumes. Moving a little bit further, we are looking at D&D activities, and there's one particular building that's contaminated with mercury, but the evolution of mercury, because it's embedded in the building, changes from time to time. So instead of sending workers there all the time and having them in full gear, we use, again, sensors within that building, mercury sensors, and then correlating it with things like temperature, humidity, the weather, the atmospheric pressure, and then identifying when is the lowest time that mercury is emitted from the building. This way we can send workers to work. So this is on a safety perspective. How do you use AI to create a safer environment? If I look at AI using large language models, there are many things that we need to do that looks at, for example, proliferation threat. Looking at the reports that are already published by United Nations, by nonprofit organizations, by think tanks, we can feed all of those models and then determine a 3 to 5 year likely outcome using our own large language models, not using things like ChatGPT, because they're focused on a very small area. So we use AI for tritium inventory in fusion machines. This helps us not only to optimize the fusion process, but to keep track of what the fuel needs are and how we can purify that fuel on a real time. We use AI to determine the potential position and a timing for lightning strike, as well as fog formation through our weather center, because that's a service we provide to the Savannah River site, and we need new tools to better predict worker safety. So these are just some of the examples of the AI. There are many more, not only in our laboratory, but across all national laboratories that focus on real critical things that are used every day.
No, I think that's good, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the workforce. You mentioned sensors, you mentioned, some of you have also talked about this being a data-rich environment, which it certainly is. I have questions on data coming up. But when you think about the workforce, you're onboarding all of these emerging technologies. This is kind of a question for everyone to go maybe down the line here, but are we upskilling and reskilling our workforce to make sure that they know not only the opportunity with AI, but also some of the threat vectors? Are we kind of educating, keeping not just the feds, but also our contractors up to speed on where those vectors are? Angela, if you want to start us off.
My gut reaction to that is not fast enough. I think for us, at least in my swim lane in procurement, acquisition, project management area, we got to figure out, do we need AI first? And then what can, in repetitive tasks where you don't need our conscious kind of mind, what can be done from an AI perspective and swapped out? I mean, and this is beyond data analytics. This is Gen AI that we're talking about, and coming up with a contract by itself. What does that look like? I get asked a lot on, are you guys going to use AI to evaluate our proposals? And that will gin up the anxiety in the workforce. So I think the upscaling for us is practice, practice, practice at this point. We've got to figure this out and then get folks comfortable in where the application could happen, and then figure out how to do the upscaling.
Right, I think that's a really good point with the workforce, and this is why I always try to mention upskilling is, making sure that the workforce is also relevant to the new technologies that you're onboarding, right? So even if you were to have an AI tool helping you to evaluate, having a human on the other side of that to fact check or to consider other factors, I assume would still be necessary at that point.
Yeah, it definitely. And I think, the COVID experience for the rest, all of us went through it, but coming back and the job that we do, we push a lot of paper in our contracts organization and project management organization. And it is easy to get complacent and repetitive. Yeah. And so the error rate is there and the time. So I think the ability to integrate it in is key, and getting folks comfortable.
And any thoughts, workforce skilling, reskilling that you have?
Yeah, first I would say is, kind of responding to Angela's point, what we've been doing is taking every RFP, every winning proposal, and every score we got, and we feed it into a machine, and it helps us build better proposals and better win rate. So, I'm just kidding.
I thought you were kidding, but I didn't want to actually say that. Okay,
No.
so you are kidding?
No, yeah, I am kidding.
Okay,
So,
thank you for clarifying.
yeah, just kidding. No, well, you got to have fun at this, right? Or
Absolutely.
If they take your sense of humor, they've taken everything. But hey, so on the upscaling piece, the number one thing we get, rightfully so, because where the rubber really meets the road on this for us in practical applications, is at the technicianal level. So we naturally get worker questions like, is what you're doing going to replace me in the cab of this heavy equipment? Is what you're doing going to replace me as an industrial hygiene technician? Is this going to replace me as a worker? And then now this gets to the upscaling question. And what it's more than just answering them. It's demonstrating to them that isn't happening and isn't going to continue to happen. And so I'll give you some examples. We've deployed some new machine aid things in our heavy equipment, working in partnership with Caterpillar, that not only makes machine movement more efficient for us in very tight conditions. And if you heard me speak yesterday, I talked about how we're really in these tight conditions at the National Defense Complex called Y-12, taking down a major building within 20 feet of an operating facility. And so proximity, position management, anti-tip over technologies, anti-overloading technologies, we've helped that operating engineer to understand that those are all aids for them for productivity and safety. Another area is in the area of industrial hygiene. We now integrate the tools into their training. So they see that it's not replacing them, they see that it's aiding them. And the most classic example for me in the last couple of years that we've been maturing is all in the area of heat stress management and the deployment of wearables and then managing that data in real time. So we now have a system in which we could have one industrial hygiene tech monitoring multiple crews. So let's call that 50 to 75 people at any one time, as individuals, as it relates to their individuals, their own physiology and heat stress. Our techs have become comfortable to realize that that's not replacing, that's aiding them in doing their job, which is keeping those folks safe in the building. I want to build on the comment that was made with regard to the partnership we have with SRNL on the mercury monitoring. I'll give you a very practical outcome of this in how it affects workers and AI. So all the data that was collected and then analyzed and then shared with us has resulted in mercury limits that people are being exposed to be reduced by somewhere between 4 and 8x. That increased the safety margin, which again, that's our job, right, as low as reasonably achievable, but it increased the productivity of that workforce by 3x. So we got out of that building doing that work 3 times quicker, which is a multi-million-dollar savings, just by being able to target and identify, based on the partnership with SRNL and their equipment, targeting that between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m., that was the optimum time, safest time, most productive time to do the work. And the key was helping our folks the physical, we had fun with the laborer thing in the beginning, the physical laborers going and understanding how that is more protective of them and better for their company, better for their organization, better for their outcomes, which is the trade-off to having to come to work from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m., because if anybody's done that, that's low on the fun meter too. But they're sophisticated enough, upscaled enough to understand the value of that. And so there's very practical examples of that where we're demonstrating to them that you're not being replaced, you are being a better brother's keeper of your labor brothers and sisters in the field. They are safer because of the work you do, and you are more efficient in doing it, and efficient companies stay in business.
Yeah, I like that you talked about, you're when you're onboarding people, you're making AI part of that conversation, so it's not a surprise. I think that's a really interesting and important model. Tom, I just wanted to kind of reflect also from the engineering perspective and what you're doing. How are you kind of thinking about upskilling or reskilling? Are there certifications that you think are really valuable out there to help get the workforce where it needs to be in terms of AI?
From the standpoint of the engineering research, there may be a point where certification and some of that comes in, but right now I think our biggest focus has been kind of on the strategy of how we roll this out. You asked a question about, are we good about the opportunities and the threats? I would say I think we've been very good on the opportunities, having people thinking and forward-looking. I think we've been maybe less successful really having folks digest the threats that come with that. But from a rollout strategy in our engineering organization, we've taken a heavy lean on some of our vendor partners with the various tools. And the model we've had is to try and set up first SMEs internal to the company that work with the vendors to come in and get them as like a super user, right? And then use those super users planted in the various facilities to set up circles of practice that then expand and expand. So we're doing this on a more managed basis as opposed to kind of wild west in that regard. And that's, I think, worked very, very well. And you kind of see that light and dawn creeping in as more and more folks see what just can be done. And I'd say, like Kim was speaking to, and I had the pleasure of attending a presentation by a fellow out of Stanford named Jeremy Utley, and his big push on this was that at this point in time, AI is not an oracle, it's not magic, it's an assistant. And if you view it as an assistant to your human productivity, that's going to be really the best model for moving forward. And that's how we've pushed that as well with our folks. I think in large part, it's been wildly positively received. But again, I think that exuberance in terms of what's in the art of the possible, and I'm not saying we've created major gaps or risks, but I think we are going to need to think very hard about what the guardrails are, and make sure that we're doing this in a staged and appropriate manner, that we don't get out in front of our headlights from a threat standpoint.
And I think the comment about having guardrails while the enterprise is experimenting or sandboxing is something that we have seen a lot of, and I think it's important. I want to throw a little bit of spice into the discussion, and you normally don't hear that with EM, but I think just to get the juices flowing a little bit more here, is there an area in your line of work where AI is not playing a role that you would like to try experimenting with? Anyone? Angela?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of areas where it's not playing a role in acquisition, and we would like to get there. I think we've taxed humanity and how fast we can go in certain things, and we've been at this for decades, and we can't seem to get an RFP out and awarded in less than, 2 years. We got it down. we got it down to about 12 months, but then it starts creeping back up again. So I think this is an area where if we could find a model, and I don't think there's anything COTS out there yet. So I am a little leery in investment because it could be like chasing the sheen. But I think we have to get there to compete. I think because industry, we have to let the free market go, but we as the government cannot be left behind here either.
That's a good point, not being left behind by emerging technologies. Any particular thoughts?
Yeah, two for us. One is in the area of risk-informed estimating and risk-informed pricing. I think that the time is critical for us to be figuring out how to effectively apply it there, because at the end, if we do it effectively, it's going to strip a lot of conservatisms out of our estimate basis and our pricing. Every dollar is precious. We want to put it to work. We don't want it sitting in a reserve somewhere. So we need to reduce the margins in our estimating, and I don't mean our profit margins. So,
You're not joking about that comment.
yeah. And then second is in the area of system planning and scenario management regarding how you pivot, how do you step away from one element of the playbook and move to the next element of the playbook. I think Tom's team in Savannah River sets the example for our whole industry in system planning, and I know they use a lot of innovative tools with regard to that. And in our company, we need to take the next step in system planning. The system has become so complicated and dimensional that it's just not smart people in a room anymore running pivot tables in a Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't work. You cannot get enough. And again, then you got margin, you got multiple margins, multiple conservatisms factoring into it. And we're really seeing that now that we have to cohabitate with sites that are operational while we're still trying to clean them up.
Right.
So.
Right. That does add an additional challenge. Dr. Majidi, question for you. Where is AI not being used today that you would like to see it being used?
Well, the simple answer is everywhere, but it's a qualified everywhere, because we have to validate the efficacy of AI when we use them, especially when they're focused on processes. So the biggest challenge we have is we're always a little bit behind in a DOE complex, especially when it comes to qualification of what is allowed, what is not allowed in our system, how can we use it. Every year, there is a tremendous amount of work that's not done on behalf of DOE, simply because we don't have enough people, we don't have enough bandwidth to execute it. I see AI as our tool that can increase that bandwidth. So it's not necessarily that we need less people doing the work. We need the same number of people or even more people to do even more work. So how do we integrate AI into a workforce that everybody can use it as a tool to enhance their job? We can do it in waste disposition, identifying the packaging, understanding the pedigree of what waste is in that. Do we have a better idea of what is it that we are shipping into WIP? Looking at WIP itself, we can identify how do you stage things in a way that has the lowest dose impact on the workers that are working? How do you increase the size of the waste store in the galleries? Looking at our own operations, how do you improve the effluent of waste from our facilities? How do you minimize it? How do you stage your operations to be even more effective in a way you execute? There's really not an area in my mind that you can't use AI, but how do you validate AI in every area? And that's where we're really short in bandwidth.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's two. I think when we get to, there's I think maybe 3 or 4 examples where I think we are very good at deploying. We'll get those later. But the two that I would say we're not using right now, we're pushing to get there, but aren't yet. One is Ken had mentioned our system audit. I think we have a gold standard model with the DBD subcontractor, and I think others have talked before, but a very, very detailed time and motion and chemistry, physics model of how the whole liquid waste system interacts. But right now, that's a run a scenario. You give it a scenario, and it runs and validates. So it does it very fast. So you can give it lots of scenarios. You can get a distribution. It's a very, very helpful tool for validating or invalidating some ideas or strategies that the management team, the technical team comes up with. We're in the process of trying to add a financial aspect to that. So another constraint in addition to just what chemistries are compatible, incompatible, what transfer lines are physically there or not, that you can add in financial aspects to that. But to be able to overlay on that some machine intelligence to actually be picking and learning what scenarios go well and don't, and can actually have an optimization function above and beyond a verification function is something that would be very, very powerful, and I think is within the art of the possible. Look at, but it's not there yet. The other one is getting outside of just the engineering technical, how do I analyze all this, but to operators. And we're pushing hard for this, but it's not there yet, but like smart round sheets. How do I make sure that I'm almost error-proof? And we've had instances of LCO issues or TSR misses where I've gone and done a surveillance and somebody NA'd it or otherwise. How do I construct, we're moving to, online round sheets and things like that, operational acceptance check sheets and things like that. How do I infuse a degree of machine intelligence in there to drive the probabilities of those kind of missteps down to a minimum, if not eliminate? Again, I think that is within the art of the possible, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think those are interesting examples, especially financial management. Just looking at the clock here, before we kind of get into see if there's any audience questions, I know folks are looking forward to lunch. I don't blame you. But I was hoping we could talk a little bit about data, which some of you have mentioned the importance of data, and I recently read an interesting fact. I hope it's true because I'm going to use it. And if it's not true, it will make for an interesting question either way. But the Department of Energy is the world's largest producer of unclassified data in the world, right? And I don't know if you can quantify that into however much data that is, but it sounds like it's a lot. Are we doing a good job making use of our data today? And if not, where would you kind of like to push it? Because I look at the enterprise, whether you're NNSA, EM, DOE, all of these disparate sites, sometimes they have to talk to each other, surprisingly. Are we doing a good job with data today? Anyone want to take that on? Tom?
I'll take a quick cut on that. On a technical side, I'm going to say yes, like how the plants run this and other. But one area, this is kind of bizarre for this year, but on capital projects, DOE is probably the biggest owner and executor of actual nuclear capital projects over the last 50 years. But taking that data and actually having, when you go to another project, hey, what should this cost? Or is this a proper estimate, is always a first time kind of liar's poker game of what's there. But to be able to use data analytics tools or machine learning to go mine that data in some manner so the department had an actual strong basis for this is what the engineering should be, this is what the unit rates, this is what the construction are, it might be very powerful in terms of its ability to control costs and those type of environments.
So we're making improvements, could be better in certain areas, it sounds like. Dr. Majidi, any thoughts? Are we data?
No, I can't, I totally agree with Tom. We do generate a tremendous amount of data. The data, I'm going to say, it's not always very well curated. So we do need to go back and curate the data in a way that's actually useful for potential AI applications. So with that in mind, there's a lot of work to be done because we have tremendous high quality data that's sitting in various places that we need to access in almost every area that the Department of Energy touches. Not to mention all the research and development that's being done in all the Office of Science laboratories. That data is available commercially on all publication websites. But again, they're looking at it, how do we curate these better? And I would say the stuff that's been published over the past 5 to 10 years, they're pretty well moderated and curated, but data that's older than 10 years, that's a little bit harder to judge.
A little more difficult to get your hands on that. Just rounding out with Angela or Ken, any final thoughts on data?
Just well, you go ahead, Ken. I'll wait. In procurement space, we've got a lot of data, a lot of data. I don't know that we know what the data means sometimes. So I think we got to get to a place where we're crunching that mass amount of data and creating new data that then from a humanistic aspect or humanity can assess and make better risk decisions.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I would echo the 2 points that were made here. One was on the concept of a source of truth. So that we have a more fundamental understanding holistically of the pedigree, where it exists, these concept of data lakes, that aspect of it. So that's that whole source of truth concept. And then the other is I think the point Angela made, which is the migration from almost inconceivable volumes of data to information. So we see that, whether it's enabling folks to use the Power BI tool sets, those kind of things, and even know where to start.
Right.
And so that, marrying up a source of truth so that you know relevancy, condition of it, and then how you then pair that to from voluminous data to information and data.
Right, that you can actually use.
Yes.
Right? That you can use. Thank you for that. Just turning to our audience, I think we have time for one or two questions if there are any from the audience. I believe there are mics up here. I see one or two folks getting up. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm in communications and marketing at Hanford. And so I know from PR, public affairs space, there's incredible daily uses of Gen AI tools. And I'm seeing a lot of that in other industries. And I know have had conversations with my team about the lack of use of Gen AI at this time puts us behind in building skills and making us competitive and improving our results. I would be curious, just for the panelists, and then even if you'd indulge me, like folks in the room, who has personally used a Gen AI tool or others? And then if you've seen value in that. Thanks.
Great question. So I think the question is, have any of you used a Gen AI tool? And those who are not familiar, generative AI, so producing something new from data that you are putting in. Angela or anyone?
ChatGPT, $6.99. I am encouraging my own staff to use it on a daily basis and just practice. I don't want to be left behind in the government. I don't want to be the ones on Lotus Notes when everybody else is on Windows, at this point. And I think that we're not going to be able to develop crisp use cases without practicing. I think we're going to miss the mark. And because those language models are going to have to be developed. And if the language model is developed erroneously, then we could have real problems. So.
Yeah, the one area that we're really focused in, two in communication space. One is the application of Gen Tech to understand imaging and imaging refinement, which is we're just kind of getting into. The other piece is actually in both relevancy and refinement approaches. And so I'm using the tool. It's regeneratively understanding what I'm asking it, and there has to be a sophistication on how I refine my question and I refine my objectives to it for those of you that have been using it. And so to Angela's point, we're focusing more on our folks becoming practitioners on how to interrogate and refine what it's asking of the tool. A good example for me is that I personally am trying to figure out to use is how to be more effective with AI Assistant in Adobe, for example, in high volume documents. And so we're focusing a lot of attention on refinement approaches. And there's a certain strategy, there's a certain cadence to doing that.
Yeah, and I know the question wasn't for me, but I know a lot of folks also are using Claude, which is part of Anthropic, which is a free capability that you can go online and use at any time. I think Claude is pretty fast and pretty accurate, but Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say to your piece in communications, there's two areas we're trying to pilot true generative AI. That is on training for some generic topics to be able, and some of the initial pilot results indicate we might be able to save like 70% of resources in developing, like, here's how to install a generic valve, here's how, various things for general training. So a lot of opportunity there. The other one is, I think, in some of these digital avatars for communication. I think President of SRNC, Dave Olson, gives a master class in general on employee relations and communications, but that takes him filming a lot of film time. As I mentioned, a digital avatar with something like that, you might be able to achieve those same type of communication results simply by typing. That's what I want to say and moving forward. So I think there's a couple of examples and I think if I understand your realm right on communications where there's an awful lot of opportunity for some big efficiencies and savings.
And then thank you. And Dr. Majidi, just to round us out before lunch, any final thoughts on Gen AI tools?
So I personally use Gen AI at home, not at SRS site. We're not allowed to use Gen AI at SRS. So These are things like ChatGPT or anything that's actually hosted on systems that are not certified cloud utilization or on-prem. So every AI example I used, they're all being used on-prem systems or running on desktops, depending on the level of AI that you want to use. Personally, using AI, you get lots of great stuff out of it, but you always have to be a skeptic. Not always the quality is exactly what you want or accurate. You know, we've seen a number of examples when you let the AI decide what they're going to give you, you're going to end up with an AI that's provides you with an ignorant answer. You're going to end up with a racist AI. We've seen all of those examples. That's why I say you really have to couple it with a subject matter expert, with an analyst who understand the process and then can help you not only teach the AI, but validate the data that's going to go into the AI.
Thank you for that response. Really appreciate it. And thanks to our panel for today. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. We have one more question before lunch. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jean Beard. I'm the EM CIO, and I just wanted to mention that the department is just about to issue its FY 25 to 28 enterprise data management strategy. So I think Candace may have concurred today, soon, but so you should all check it out.
Thank you very much. Thank you for our panelists. Really appreciate the discussion.